So for those who tried out for the CCC team trials that we had like last week, we have Cody Wellew, who put them all together for us, and he'll be giving a brief overview of like what he was looking for before we get started with our presentation.
Brief is accurate. Is it always this quiet in here when you have started? No. Sometimes. It's like I started my class. It's terrible. All right, so things we were looking for, it varies a bit. I don't know. So I'll start on inject side. Injects, I put the most weight in the network assessment report inject. If you did that, you know exactly what I'm talking about there. I had a Nessus scan and waited for you to ask me for that Nessus scan and give you that Nessus scan or something like that, and basically follow the instructions. There were some pretty detailed instructions on that inject that was lifted directly from a past national deal. Completing that to the fullest extent possible was the most significant item there. I think it asked for like green, yellow, red rankings in the executive summary. If that wasn't there, that was kind of a big ding on it because it flat out asks for that. My favorite report I got back on that one included remediation steps. I think only one did that, and I think that's a very, very, very good thing to include with a report like that. When you talk about vulnerabilities, tell me how to fix them. That's a big deal. On the Windows side, honestly, my biggest thing was being able to identify and then fix the web app. There was I don't remember what it was, I don't think it was WordPress. I don't remember the application, but there was a web application on one of the servers with a database, a SQL server on a different server. No one that tried out found that and said they found it, like find it, change your password. That was a big first step. User accounts and things like that, changing passwords. Folks are pretty good at changing passwords with the user accounts they find. I don't remember a whole lot of local user account stuff though. Everyone looked at the domain accounts. There were local user accounts that had administrative access to things. Don't forget about those local accounts. The domain users group was a member of the domain admins group. I think 2 people found that one. That was a pretty significant issue and vulnerability there. There's some GPO things that I put in there that I wanted people to find and change, and there wasn't a whole lot of action on that. Firewall was disabled in GPO. I think everyone probably looked at the firewall in some way, shape, or form, which is good. On the Linux side, so Andrew actually set up the Linux portion for me, so thank you to him for that. High level, some of the items he had listed, he had an SSH key and authorized key belonging to root Gibson on both systems. Etsy cron tab started a netcat root shell on a couple different ports on the 2 different systems. I think most people found that one. Not everyone. MySQL root user had a blank password. There was another root user that shouldn't really have been there. Nobody was in the sudo group. Etsy sudoers was world writable. There was a web shell on the web server in, I think, var, dub, html, wp stuff and things.php. I don't think anyone found any of that. There was maybe one Linux report that mentioned the existence of MySQL and a web thing. That's it. Again, just same thing as over on Windows that existed over there. Almost no one found that it existed and even thought about changing a password on any of those, which I was pretty disappointed in general. Yeah, I think those are probably the most significant things on all of those. And then just general hardening steps. Like that was the other piece that we're looking for, and not necessarily vulnerable things for you to find, but what did you do to harden? And everyone did something and had a list of some things they did. So, questions? All right. Thanks for playing.
By the way, for anyone who doesn't know, Cody's our faculty advisor, and he's cool.
I know I don't show up a bunch, but I'm here.
He's here in spirit.
Ask for me and I sometimes appear. That's about how it goes.
Alright, so one of the announcements we have is tomorrow night at 6 p.m. we have a computer club party. There'll be mainly pizza as far as food goes, but we'll have like Jeopardy, Jackbox games, and a cyber-themed escape room. I'm not sure what that's going to be like yet, whoever's planning that, but if you guys ever play Jackbox, it's a ton of fun. Does anyone know how to describe Jackbox games? Same.
A bunch of random mini games, I guess.
A bunch of random mini games.
Yeah.
You connect on your phone to like someone projecting it or playing on a TV. You join like a special code, and there's like a bunch of smaller challenges you can solve and like beat others and get more points. So make sure you sign up so that way we can get more pizza if need be, I guess. So on the presentation, I'll be teaching about stopping hacks against IIS, which if you don't know, it's like Windows web server that they have, which you can download built in on Windows Server, like any version from like 2003, I believe. So if you want the VApp for this presentation, you can sign up on cybernet.devsec.club. If you don't have an account already, it'll ask for a secret, which will be #devsec, and then you can just go to your account, add your IA Lab username, and then you'll be able to sign up on the button on the screen and deploy. So other announcements we have is that end of semester party I mentioned, 6 to 7. Then we also have on December 7th, which is the Tuesday night. So that'll be replacing our typical meeting that we have like today. Cyber Conquest, if you don't know, is a purple teaming competition where we have teams of 4 and your team has to defend and attack a set of boxes. And you get points for kicking people out of your boxes, and you get points for keeping your services up, keeping people from attacking your boxes, and keeping persistence on other teams' boxes, which we have plenty of vulnerabilities, things you can fix. So it's a really good practice if you want to learn to hack and keep persistence. We also have like a wiki set up so that if you don't know how to get started, there's kind of that on there to help you get going. One last thing, all right, so there's the Dean's Cup, which there'll be interest form coming soon with a better explanation of that. That's over the winter break. That's put on by the Dean of the Beacon College. It's kind of like a fun hackathon that goes on the entire winter break, and you can do it individually or in teams. So the big announcement is the DSU's 2022 CCDC team has been decided. So I'll reveal that here. So if you guys tried out and you didn't make it, best luck next year. There's plenty of time to learn and grow your skills. We have a couple, I guess we have, I think 1 or 2 graduating. I think maybe just Jake. So there will be spots opening up for next year. So you have a good shot at making it, hopefully. So if you see the rules, we have Galen as our firewall guy. So we have a primary inject Annabelle, and then we have Tyler, who's our Windows/inject. And we have 3 people who main Linux, Shane and Jake, who are not here. They're virtually, they're not here because they moved home for Christmas break. Well, weirdos. And then we have Cody, who's another Linux, and Jackson. All right, let's see.
Yeah, so if you competed or tried out and your name is not on that list, doesn't mean that you did terrible or anything like that. It was somewhat competitive. The competition is difficult and is competitive, and especially if it's your first year trying out. Thanks for doing it, honestly. Like, be participating in these things, keep trying, keep playing. You'll learn more as we go along. Like, take notes on what I just said at the beginning, things to look for, some of that. Just because these folks are on the team this year, even if they're still around next year, they all get to try out again too. So there's still more opportunities, and yeah, keep playing, keep staying involved, keep asking questions, all that. Yeah, I'm done.
And he's out. All right, so back to the presentation. What is IIS? Well, it stands for Internet Information Services, which I guess Microsoft named that a million years ago because it's pretty boring, and they probably named it something a lot more interesting now. So I mentioned earlier it was their web server. However, as opposed to the most popular web servers that are on the market today, it's closed source, which some companies prefer and some hate. Most companies do prefer that their software that they use closed source. They do have their own reasons, particularly because they like using proprietary software because they get good support, and they believe it makes them safer from attacks because people don't know what they're like the source code, so it makes it harder to attack. And it's also free. Like a lot of web servers, that it is free. There aren't too many popular servers today that cost money, so that's in line with Nginx and Apache. So some of the features that IIS provides is supports PHP. However, Microsoft does suggest their ASP.NET, which is because their web server is actually, I believe, written in it. So it makes it more faster / compatible, I guess. Also supports virtual hosts. It has a really easy SSL configuration. I'll be demonstrating that later on. Also, it can serve FTP, which is kind of a weird thing for their web server manager to do. But those are all things that you can set up. Those are, for the first three, those are things that you can do in Apache and Nginx, which are the top two. But FTP, which I don't think is a feature of Nginx or Apache, because you don't really want to usually keep those things separate, but Microsoft decided that they should go together. I'll be going over how to use PHP with IIS today, because as you see here, and so the left graphic is the use case of PHP, or like how commonly PHP was used in 2012, and on the right is how often PHP was used in 2021. As you can see, ASP.NET went down dramatically. They dropped like 11% usage, and PHP went up 1%, which isn't as dramatic, but it just, your use case in the career field, you're much more likely to use PHP than ASP.NET. So I'd suggest learning that over ASP anyway. So why is it so great? There's a GUI. Most of the options can be configured from this GUI, which you'd usually do as a user. Like for basic setup, all the options will be there in the GUI. They can click around. There's nice little buttons for them. However, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of some of the fine-tuning of the software, you will need to go through their ugly, what's it called? They just have like a ugly config that I'll go over later, and some of the config options that you could change in it for yourself if you have the use case. There's also a PowerShell configuration. They're kind of ugly. The commands are painful. You have to go through them like one by one. There's like git-IIS configuration, and then like configuration and like section or something, and there's several of them. It's kind of difficult to use. I haven't looked into it much, so I'm not the best person to ask on how to use PowerShell configuration. You could probably Google it and learn faster than I could. So like I said, there's regular options, but there's also that weird configuration menu I'll show about later. And what I like about IIS over Nginx and Apache is it's super easy to see what sites are available and what ports they're running on and what their virtual host name is. I think it just sets it up better than Nginx or Apache does. So the downsides is it's pretty significant. It's like a non-significant amount slower. As you can see here with large files, it is almost, what was that, like 40% slower than Apache. Even a simple hello world script is like almost 40% slower. And a small file, same thing, like they're all dramatically slower. Another downside is it doesn't have near the market share that Apache or Nginx does. It depends on the market share you look at. They are significantly different. I just went with this one because it seems the most accurate, because most people use Apache and Nginx over IIS because they like running the servers on Linux because it has less overhead and doesn't have all the same downsides that Microsoft IIS does. So less customizability because there's less GUI options that Microsoft offers. They're possibly there. It doesn't seem like it to me. There's just significantly less options you can modify, and they're a bit harder to reach than what Nginx or Apache does. So I'm not much of a fan of that feature. It also doesn't have community support. If you look at like Stack Overflow posts on Nginx or Apache, you'll find like any problem you have, you'll be able to solve it with one of those. And with Microsoft IIS, there's significantly less posts about it. Not because there's not the issues, it's just people just, I guess, give up or something, or they don't run into those weird, bizarre issues that Microsoft provides. Also, judging by like the last year and a half or whatever, Microsoft has a terrible track record of updating their software, especially in the most critical times, like the recent Exchange vulnerabilities, like 7 of them, that led to like a ton of companies getting hacked around the country and around the world. So, where open source software usually does a significantly better job at patching their stuff and pushing out updates. So, going through, so installing Apache or installing PHP on your IIS, it's fairly straightforward, which is a benefit over Apache and Nginx. It's kind of a bit more confusing process in my opinion. So it's kind of like, so you download Microsoft Web Platform Installer, which you can just Google. So if you like Google Microsoft Web Installer, first result, you can download this plugin, and this plugin will be set up into your, if I can open my RDP session. So this is me connecting to my box that you've been deployed. You shouldn't be able to access it from the VPN, so you'll need to manually go in and like power yours on and select powered on, and then like open it with either your web console or your VMRC, whatever you prefer. So if I go in here and when you hit install as an extension on this website for Googling, it'll install it'll download an MSI file that you can run. And after you, I believe, restart, it should appear in your IIS manager, which is where you'll be able to do everything for managing IIS. Nope. All right. If you don't know how to open it, you can go to your server manager in Windows Server 2016. Go to the top right, click Manage, or not Manage, Tools. This is where a lot of the things, the more plugins you have installed, the more options that'll be in this list. So you can see here, since I installed the IIS Manager, it's right here. I can click and open that. Sometimes you can search for it in the search box and it will appear, but it's not the most consistent. So as long as you have it installed, you'll be able to open it from here. If you have like a domain set up and you have a bunch of IIS servers, usually on your domain controller or any of the boxes that has permission, you can see all the services that or all the boxes that are running IIS, which is right here, which is just the one, which you could right click and open it from here as well. If you had multiple, you can remotely manage IIS boxes if you had plural. Like if I had like another DW203-1, I could right click and open IIS Manager if it was installed. So with that open, I can just demonstrate how or where this web installer would appear. So once you install that plugin and restart, it'll be right here. You can just click and run that, or click and open that. You can run it independently if you can find where the exe is placed. I had troubles earlier. So there's 3 sections. There's Spotlight, Products, and Applications. So all the things that you can install are under Products, which there's a ton of things that you can install, like different things that might help your web server. I guess you can install the entire web server if it's not installed. You can install like default document. This is kind of like, is that like A2EN mod or something in Apache, or like it's different modules that you can add on that will help you, like redirection. I don't think is a default, that what you might have to download. So we'll go through here and we can like search PHP. You can go look for PHP 8 and you just be able to click, or whatever PHP version you want, click add and install, which if you're running the Windows Server box that I have set up, it's already installed for you. So don't need to worry about that. I have it on the slides for future reference for anyone who is looking to learn more about that or play with it around themselves. So so I have a lab for teaching how to use IIS, which is, I feel like, significantly more fun than watching me speak about IIS. So you can watch me click around in IIS and struggle instead. Hopefully that's far more enjoyable. As they don't need more time, are they loading up their Windows server and it's running slow? I'll take that as a no. So I have, I think, 5-ish things I'll be going over in the lab. So you can see here, I'll how to disable directory browsing, and it's right. Check the identity, which is like one of the most important things, or I mean, like second most important. Look where your IIS is hosting. That's very important. A lot of times in mocks, you'll get distracted, like secure. You also take time to look at what you actually have, which is an issue that a lot of us had in the tryouts recently. Is all of us were like focused on securing our boxes, but no one stopped and looked at what our web servers were running. Like, you got to know what you're securing to secure it properly. Because if we took that time to look at what we were running, we would have realized that there was like an SQL server attached to it. We would have realized that there was a password that was being stored somewhere, and we should have changed it to a more secure password. The last thing is check what error pages are being served. You might click around as much as you want to find useful information, but you might not realize that there's error pages that are serving information outside your web root, and they could contain things that could lead to red team getting like shells in your box. So
starting out. So checking error pages for weird things. So if you want to do that, short little thing. So IIS Manager, and then click on your site name and error pages. So if I go back to my RDP session, right here, go back to click this win, that like the computer name. Let's see if I can zoom in. Nope. Typical Windows. 1 sec, I gotta up the scaling so you can see it. Give me a second, I just want to make it easier to read. Yeah, there. Not use RDP. What? If anyone's having issues, feel free to raise your hand or submit to questions.devsec.club. Again, we'll probably be watching it. If he doesn't get distracted writing infrastructure, that might probably crash.
I got distracted looking up your IP, but okay.
Now I can up the scaling. There we go. What do you think? 200%? That should be fine. 175. Now I can go back to my RDP. Who thinks it'll stay? Not me. I think it'll rescale back to 100%. I'm excited to find out. And I was correct.
Woo.
Suffering. That's all I get. I guess I'm not using RDP.
Change the. You do you.
I don't know what I'm doing. Alright. I prefer the web console because I can copy and paste. So I'm just going to use that. Let's see, full screen. Nice and big. Password one bang if you don't know the password. That's a bit more readable, right? Yeah. So get started. Let's go back to our thing. So check for weird things being served on your error pages. So if you want to see, we can go to our Internet Explorer, which everybody really loves. And I cannot use it. 400%. That no. All right. So to navigate to our site, we can check it out first. So let's check out this default website, which is running. So we can click Browse on 443. It'll open up in a nice Windows Internet Explorer. So since it's running a self-signed certification, our cert, we can't. It's going to warn us that it's not signed by a CA, so like a certificate of authority. So it's not trusted for some reason. Not important to us. So we can continue to the site, see what we're running. Well, first off, we see a pony show. For those familiar with anything, you don't really want that running on your server because red team can just go on and start executing commands just right there on your root directory. So, well, I'll go over that in a little bit, how to look out for those and how to fix them entirely. So let's go to a domain. So I'm going to go to localhost/AAA because we know it doesn't exist. Hit enter. Not live. You got to go to the IP. I lied. It doesn't work. That's good. That sucks. All right. So what was supposed to happen is when you navigated to the IP of the default website, I changed the error pages that would be handed out to you. So error pages are like if something goes wrong, you know how to get like a 404 or like a 500 when something goes wrong on a remote web server. You can modify what that page looks like. So to do that in IIS, you can just go under sites and the site that you want to modify. So we're going to go with default website for this one, which is the one that just comes with IIS when it boots. Well, I modified the error pages and deleted all of them except for 404, which is serving up passwords.html, which typically you may not want red team to see. So there's no path, so it's probably serving up a relative directory. So let's go to our web root, which is by default www.root. Well, we don't see any passwords.html, but if we go to view, hidden item, there it is. So we can see that it's storing passwords, which red team would gladly use to hack in your box. So you gotta be careful when you look for in your web root. You might want to make sure you can view hidden items because you can see like, oh, there's no PHP files in my web root. I don't mind. It's not a big deal. But there could be hidden files that are serving up like a shell.php that you're not looking out for. So that's something big. I believe this isn't working because I'm not using the full IP address. So if I go on my host machine and connect to it with a VPN and go to like /AAA, yep, there we go. So this is like the passwords.html being served up because it's a 404 instead of, because it's the 404 response page. So if I went to my network traffic, I could probably see that it's like, oh, here's a 404 and this is the response, right? So refresh. Why isn't it killing? Oh.
I don't know, man.
Oh, it's over here. Yeah, see? So you can see that it says 404, but it still served me a website, which doesn't make any sense. And that's because it's responding with this when there's no other, when there's no directory that exists. So if I go back to my index.php, which I know exists, it'll give me back to the pony shell, and there'll be no passwords yet. So go to the slides. So, for remediation steps, what you can do is you can go back to your IIS manager, and you can either delete this or remove this file or remove this error page. You can edit feature settings. You can set it to detailed errors, which you probably don't want to give red team access to if there's actually something running, because detailed errors give you, I guess I can demonstrate real quick, but if you have detailed errors and navigate to your site and like make it cause a 404 error, /a, your site, it'll give way too much information. Like I feel it'll tell you what kind of login method it uses, what's the path, where is that in the system, like the requested URL. It just gives away more than it should to red teamers. So if we can patch the 404, which if there's a password.html file on your system, you should probably go ahead and like delete it so red team can't find it if they get a shell in a different way. Just a suggestion. You can keep it if you want. Next one. So stop running with system privileges. So I can demonstrate that real quick. So if I go to this IP address, which is one of the two sites running on the system. So if I do who am I'm running as IUSR, which is equivalent to www data on Linux. It's kind of like a no privilege user who just exists to run the web service on, so that way if someone did get code execution somehow, it'd be really garbage and they can't do a whole lot with it. However, very commonly set up in competitions is running web shells as root, so you can modify that in Windows. So if I go to my secret site, which I have very secretly in the left-hand bar, so if I browse to it, it's running as a virtual host, first of all, so it's running as secret.local. It's not like the first thing served as the website. It may look the same as just connecting to the IP. However, if we go to our pony shell and type who am I, it tells us we're system, which, if you know, that is the last thing you want red team to be on your box, is system, because that means they have full control over anything. They can just kick you out of the box, they can nuke all your services, and you can't do anything to stop them. So it's pretty good to not let them have, so to go ahead and patch it so they don't have system on your web server, we can go back to my thing. So there's two different ways to turn it on. So you have to do, you have to do both these to turn it on. However, if you want to turn it off, you only need to do one or the other. The best way would probably be to do this one, or like this one, because this is how you specifically turn off the application pool identity. So this is changing it from local system to what it should be, and this is like the identity of the pool. Pools are like the things that manage your sites. So to go through here, IIS manager, which we already have, application pools, the name of the application pool that we're using, which is defaults, and we click on advanced settings, so let's go do that. Open up our IIS manager. So application pool is right there. So we have two. We can see right here in our identity column that one is running in the right user group, which is application pool identity, and one is running a system. If you see this in a competition when you're running a web server, you should probably be worried that red team will use it to hack you because they will find it because white team will probably tell them about it. So to go ahead and fix it or remediate so it's not running as local system, we can right click on the one that's running as local, as running system, go to advanced settings, and then scroll down until you see identity under process model. So you can see right here, you can see a local system. If you just scroll through it quick, you can click these three bars right here, local system, and then drop it down to application pool identity, which is the right privileges you should have for this. So once you can see the identity is correct, if we tell it to restart, and go back to our pony shell, it should hopefully be no longer running as system. There we go. So now it is running as the identity of the pool, which is significantly less privileges than the entire computer. This one is how, if you want to turn it on, this is also, if you want to make sure that the site isn't running as well, this is how you do it site-based, or for individual sites, I believe. This is how you do it for the entire pool, which is nice. Who told us that after the competition?
Different school.
Yeah, I think it was some of Shane's friends told us after the competition how we can run a system. So be looking out for it if you're competing in the next Cyber Conquest, because I will make sure to enable this on all the boxes. Don't worry. So you'll have to fix it now or later. These slides will be up on the announcements. So if you want to look through for reference, you can use it to fix all your IIS boxes that you'll have. So next remediation step. So stopping hackers from using web shells. Usually in competitions, you get like 1,000 files in your web group, and you can't click through them all because unless you, you can grab through it, or like you can just search for strings in it and hopefully look for like system commands and stuff. But there's like 8 different commands in a PHP to execute commands with it. The best way is to just replace the PHP INI file, which is the configuration file for PHP, which you can use to blacklist certain functions, which stops red teamers from being able to use them on uploaded shells. So what I use is this very secure PHP-INI file from GitHub. If you're running the server in that was deployed to you, this will already be on the desktop, and I'll show you how to find the right locations that we can put in there. So step 1 is get that file downloaded. Step 2 is to find or know where PHP install location's at, or like where that config file should be, so that way you know where to drop it. A couple different ways is you can search for the PHP INI file on the box, because there will be hopefully 1 or 2, maybe like only 1. Or you can also look in program files, because you'll see like PHP in there if it's on the default install location. Or PHP info, if you set up like a quick PHP file that has like only this in it, it'll tell you where the installation is. So I have a demo set up for that. If I go back to my system, if I go to my web root, I have this config.php. If I edit it, has the PHP brackets, PHP tags, so anything within these tags will be executed. So it's running this PHP info, which kind of gives you information on the current configuration that's running. So if I go to my default thing, or my default one, which is running on just any IP that's not the secret.local, and I go to my config.php, which has that PHP info. I scroll down a bit, and I can see loaded configuration file with program files PHP version 8.0 /php.ini, which is where you'd want to drop that secure PHP file. So if we went over to our desktop, oops, that's not the one. Go over to our desktop that we have, and then Control-C that, and then made our way over to program files, PHP version 8, and found our PHP ini file. We can go move this if we want to back it up just in case you need it. You can like call it .back. It doesn't really matter what you rename it. And you can drop your new PHP file, which replace, I guess. And then if we go back to our pony shells and try running a command, it'll hopefully not work. So who am I? No response, because the commands that, so the system call that I was relying on no longer functions because it's been disabled by PHP. So if red teamers wanted to use PHP shells from now on, they'd need to go through and change your PHP INI file to re-allow them to do that. So you just gotta look out for that. If you wanna make it even harder on red team, because they will try to modify your PHP INI file if you fix it, you could go over here and slow them down by like properties or security and like transfer the ownership to trusted installer, like be a real pain in the butt. Because everybody knows if you ever tried modifying a window file owned by a trusted installer, it sucks to do. You just gotta go through like, oh, switch the thing to, oh, switch it to your user account, and then add your permissions to your account so that way you can modify the file that you own. It's a couple step process that'll hopefully slow down red team if they try to fix web shells so that way they can reuse them on the box. All right, so we now know it's fixed. So we replaced it. So next thing. So let's say you get an inject from the inject handler. This is a pretty common one that you'll see a lot of times in actual competition is configuring SSL. By default, your things will be running all HTTP, and your inject handler will be like, hey, I got an inject that says enable HTTPS. Can you do that for me? So that way we can get this inject submitted because that's worth a lot of points. So these are all the steps that you need to go through a big overview. It's first you gotta generate your certificate, then add it to the site, and then you just gotta test it and usually force the website to use HTTPS and redirect it if some user trying to connect as HTTP. So step one, let's generate a self-signed certificate, which we can do under IIS Manager. So go back here to web server, click on our system name, which will be like basically at the top. Scroll through here and we'll find that it says server certificates. That's where we want to go. And then we can go right hand side, create self-signed certificate. Click that. And it's like, oh, inject cert. And you just put it on the web hosting store. I don't think it really matters. It's probably better to have it in the web hosting. And click OK. That's how easy it was. Probably significantly easier than creating a self-signed cert in Ubuntu, to be honest. Like, look at those guys. They gotta take commands to do it. I can just click 2 buttons and it's there. So now we gotta configure it. So if we go to our website that we want to configure SSL on, we can right click on the site and then edit bindings. So edit bindings. So this little box will pop up. If you want to list on more ports for your specific website or change the host name, which is like if I go to my host name is like a virtual host. So if I required it to connect under like mysite.com, it would only connect to the website if that host name was used to connect to the website. You can make it list on specific IP addresses. So if you had a server that had multiple interfaces, like if it had multiple Ethernet cards, you can specify what IP address you want it to be. Usually that'll be like your external IP address, so that way it can be reached from the external firewall. So to specify the certificate that we used, you click on HTTPS, or if it doesn't exist, like if it was gone, we can add. Then go here, select a type, set this to HTTPS. It'll change the port hopefully for us. If we have like an IP address we need to specifically use, or a host name that already exists, that the other side of the site already uses, and then you can just go here, SSL certificate, and then eject cert, and then click OK. There we go. So we can browse the site at 443 and make sure that certificate worked for us. So we can continue the site. It works. We got the HTTPS, and we can connect to the site just fine. So that means it worked. So now we can move on to requiring it on the web server. So once we go back to IIS Manager, click on the website again, go to SSL settings, check mark this require SSL, and set client certificates to either require or accept. And then you'll have SSL required on that website, which is nice to have. Another thing, so one of the last things is setting up FTP. Like I mentioned earlier, IIS can serve FTP it's not really serving it in the web browser. It's just like an FTP server that's running on whatever port 21 or something. So if this is also a common object to have, it would be like, oh, can you set up this FTP share or this Samba share of this specific folder? And just kind of like in the hopes that you misconfigure it, I guess, or just another thing that you have to do, and it like becomes a required service. It'll like start checking you for points, and if you don't do it, you start losing points. So you better learn how to set up all these random services that it wants you to do. So some steps, if it's not installed already, is to just go to the Add Roles or Features, which is under Server Manager, which I talked about earlier. Click Manage, and then Add Roles and Features. And this is adding roles or features to the local server that you're using. So in computations, when you have multiple web servers, you might have to go to that one to add FTP or add remotely, which you can do. So go through installation type, server selection, which we selected. We want to select this one. This is where you would select like other servers if you have permission to do so. Scroll here. So it's under the web server IIS section. You expand this, and if it's, I already installed it for the demo here, but you just check mark FTP service, and then just hit next until you get to the end, and you hit install, which you can't do because you didn't select any features this time. But if you were adding FTP in the future, that's how you can do so. So to get the FTP to appear in your IIS manager, you'll need to reboot. So since I already did that for you, we can see that the FTP manager is now here and available. So if we wanted to add a new FTP thing for someone to connect to, we can right click and then add FTP site, and then we can name it my FTP and then specify a directory. We want to be nice and insecure, and it's like, let's say share our C drive, because that's a helpful thing to do, right? So the port, usually default, that'll tell you. If you want, you can specify a cert for this. Let's just say we wanted nice plain text SSL. So anonymous authentication, which Nginx might require you to do. If they want authentication, you can do so here. You can like select basic, and then it'll use users in the FTP directory or FTP users group, and it'll check the users against that if they have access or not, I believe. Or you can specify what group you want right here. So if you want all users to be authenticated, or it's like specified roles, so you can be like FTP group, and they have read-write permissions, so that way only FTP group has access to read and write, which is preferably better than giving it to all users if you don't need to, or even worse than anonymous. Like if you can avoid that, you usually don't want anonymous users to be able to access your FTP share, especially if there's like important information, which hopefully you wouldn't host in the first place on the share. So that's how you have an FTP site. I don't think, any questions on IIS? Does that make any sense?
So the secure PHP INI is just regular PHP, but it says not to respond to certain commands, or.
Oh yeah, good question. So I can demo that real quick. So if I open up the a secure PHP INI file, which is right here on the desktop. So if we scroll through it, there's a lot of lines. A lot of them are comments because it's like the default file. So if we right click, I believe disable. Right here. So there's a disables functions parameter in this file, which is like a comma delimited list of functions in PHP that you can't use. So functions are like, if I was like, oh, system parentheses like, oh, ls, and like list all the files, or even worse, like I get like a post parameter that it like executes, which I don't want red teamers to have access to. I can just disable all these functions, which could give red teamers access to access to my system. So like it disables exec, system, shell exec, pass through, system, which are all system twice for some reason, I guess, but all things that red team can access to use the execute commands on your system and take over your box. I'm not sure what most of these do. These probably for like remote read and write for files, which stop red teamers. Since I don't know what most of them do, this is why I use this secure file, because there's no way I would be able to not screw up one of these config options. There's probably a couple other here that are important. I believe there's like timeouts that are specified as well. So save. So the default PHP INI file doesn't disable any functions. They're all available, as you'd expect. So to go ahead and remove, like if you had to malicious site. Like as we noticed, both our sites were running pony shells, which probably wouldn't be default or for our CCDC. They'd probably be running like a /shell.php. I wouldn't waste time going through looking for shells. But at the start, I'll probably like drop this secure PHP INI file and like make sure that they can't execute commands at all, and then look for them later. What you really want to look out for is what's actually like what services are connected to your web server, because you may be able to disable your like all the shell commands, but there still could be like a MySQL database that can be connected to, and the red team has access to, because then they can bypass your PHP config and still execute commands through MySQL, which would be an issue. So if there was like a malicious site that was running a web server, if you wanted to remove it as well, if you go to the manager, you can right click the site and just remove it, and then it's gone. Pretty straightforward. No restarting necessary. Just remove from your server. I also mentioned that I was going to go over some more advanced options. So if you click on a site name, go to Configuration Editor. There are way too many options in this thing. Not too many options, but there's just a lot of stuff that you most likely won't need. I guess they're in there for like the end use for some developer who wants to use them. Like you can specify. A lot of these options are actually in the GUI, but not all of them. So if we go down here, we can like expand web server, which is where most it's going to be at, and like security. Like I think authentication is an option right here. So like a lot of these are just in that text file. Like it's just in a manageable BIOS configuration editor if you wanted to use it with only text. I just prefer to use the GUI since it's a bit easier to click around in, but it might be faster to script it out with like PowerShell if you really want to get fast at it. So that's all I have for this presentation on IIS and how to secure it. It's not that difficult to secure IIS like as a service. The hard part is securing what's running. If you have any questions, at me on Slack or on Discord, and I'll be happy to help you if my presentation wasn't clear, which I wouldn't blame you. There's a lot of different nuances when it comes to using Windows. So, thank you. I'm good. You can go. It's coming. Don't forget to sign up. Bring your friends, or you can use it to meet new people.